Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. This week's video is going to be an alternate universe that I've seen a couple times. It's where the SkyWing Dragonet survives. I will be playing around with dates and things that happen. Like, for example, Starflight doesn't get captured and a couple things don't happen. And I won't go into too much detail. This is part 1 of 2, and part 2 will be next week. Okay, so let's get started. Ash knew that she was different than the other Dragonets. True. Everyone was different, but she knew that she was more different. For one thing, she was blind. For another thing, her back leg was bent up so that she couldn't ever walk on it. Kestrel decided that she was a crippled, useless waste of scales. The rest of the Dragonets, however, decided that she was unique and special. Each Dragonet did their best to make sure that she could get around. Sunny, for example, was her fourth leg. Glory, as much as she could, was her eyes. Clay made sure that she got enough food. Tsunami protected her from Kestrel's fury, and Starflight made sure that she would still learn everything as well as the rest of them. If she didn't understand something, she'd ask him, and he'd reread it to her. Ash was always quieter than the rest of the Dragonets. She knew that it was partly because Kestrel didn't like it when she talked. Kestrel just didn't like her. But it was also because there was no point in saying a lot of stuff. Not all the time. She talked when it was necessary. And she loved making up poems in her head and sharing them with the Dragonets. As far as Kestrel knew, she couldn't talk. She used to talk, until she stopped when Kestrel decided that she was just a noisy chatterbox. The Dragonets grew up, of course, knowing that there were only supposed to be 5 in the prophecy. Kestrel decided really fast that Ash was the 5th Dragonet and not Glory. The rest of the Dragonets wanted all 6 of them to fulfill the prophecy. Who cares if there's only supposed to be 5, Tsunami used to say. It can be all 6 of us. We can all work together. Maybe a prophecy is just a guideline, Sunny said, and then we do it ourselves. Of course, Ash knew that Kestrel was in charge. Kestrel would decide what happened. And Kestrel wouldn't allow both of the broken Dragonets to work. Marrowseer agreed with Kestrel. When he came to visit them, he pointed a talon at Glory, and it was terrifying. He didn't like her, which should have been obvious, but he didn't like Ash either. He looked over at the Guardians and said, "I'm going to be back tomorrow, and there should not be both a SkyWing and a Rainwing here when I do," before storming out of the caves. Kestrel wanted Glory to go away. Of course, she had always wanted Glory to be gone, but this time she knew that she had a deadline. Either she's gone tomorrow morning, or we're gone tomorrow morning. One or the other. And personally, I like my life. Or about as much as I can appreciate it. Being stuck in this cave with a bunch of brats. Webbs didn't want anything to happen to either of the Dragonets he'd helped raise for 6 years. Dune told Kestrel it was up to her. Clay and Tsunami had been hearing this, and so they had to figure out how to escape. Tsunami had been working on escaping for a very long time, but now they really had to. Kestrel had already chained her to a stalagmite, so she couldn't do anything. But she already had a plan, and she thought that maybe Clay could do it. She told him to swim through the caves, and maybe there was a way to get out. Starflight gave him some tips. Sunny gave him a hug. Ash twined her tail around his. "Glory and I thank you." "Where's Glory?" Clay asked. "Hiding," Ash said. "She changed her scales to match the background so that maybe the Guardians won't see her. Maybe they'll think she escaped too." "Okay, I'm going," Clay said. While he was gone, Starflight and Sunny had figured out how to melt Tsunami's chain so that she could get out, and she swam too, catching up with Clay about halfway through. While Clay was hurt, he'd been poisoned of some sort of toxin. But when they got out and let the other Dragonets out, they were captured again, this time by Queen Scarlet. Ash and Sunny were put into decorative bird cages. Well, they were decorative according to Sunny. But Ash didn't want to be in a cage. She'd finally escaped. Well, she hadn't done anything, but she'd finally gotten out, only to be captured again, and this time put into an actual cage. She'd always felt like the mountain was a cage, but this time she was actually in a cage. She'd never been able to breathe fire, so she couldn't get out, but Sunny tried. She burned a little tiny bit at a time while all the dragons were gone, until she made a hole big enough to get out. After she'd done that, she went over to Ash's cage and burned a hole through that. It had to be bigger than hers since she was much smaller than Ash, but Ash had still been able to get out. Sunny had led her out to a balcony, in the doorway, because the queen was out there. At first, Sunny nearly yelped and decided to turn around until Ash heard Tsunami's voice saying, "Let me in there, let me." Then they both turned around and saw that chained to the platform were were Clay and Tsunami. Starflight was in the arena, battling scavengers. "Eee," Sunny said. "I hate scavengers." Ash reminded her that scavengers couldn't do anything. Sunny said, "Yeah, but they killed Queen Oasis and started this whole war and started our whole prophecy and made it so that we're here." "Good point," Ash said. "Let's go." "What are we doing?" Sunny said. "Hiding. We can't afford to go out there or else we'll be put back into those bird cages with more reinforcement so that we'll never get out." Sunny didn't want to, but she knew that Ash had a point. But before they could turn away, Glory snapped. They heard a tiny snap. They looked over and saw that there was a marble tree with Glory on it. It must be Glory. What else? What other Rainwing would it be? But she was sleeping, which Glory only ever did it in the afternoon. Well, she spit venom at the queen, and they all ran away. First they went to the Mud Kingdom, which Clay said he had no family for him there, except for his siblings, but they were fighting in the war, and he couldn't afford to join them because he had to fulfill a prophecy. So next they decided to go to the Kingdom of the Sea to try to find Tsunami's family. They learned from Kestrel, after they escaped the Sky Kingdom, that Tsunami was a princess, which, yeah, she was happy about, because now she could maybe even be queen and boss people around even more. Starflight had told her that she was the only heir left, which, yeah, was awesome, because now she had to be the queen, so her mother would have to protect her and her friends, right? Wrong. When they went there, they found out that there was indeed another heir, one that had been hatched after the scroll Starflight read had been written. Anemone, a tiny little pink and blue dragonette. Much younger than any of them, obviously, but about as smaller than Sunny, of course, but nearly as big. Sunny was much smaller than the other dragonettes, but she was still their age. Clay and Ash were chained to a cave, away from Tsunami. The other 3 dragonettes weren't chained, but they couldn't just leave them. They had to stay with them. Well, staying with them got a whole lot harder when a storm decided to roll in and started flooding their cave. Sunny tried to pick the lock. She tried and tried, but she didn't know how. So, yeah, they were trapped. Until, after 3 days of being gone, Tsunami showed up with a key and a way out. They moved to a much higher cave, a cave where fire was allowed, built a fire, had some food, and slept. The next morning, they decided to escape. Because, yeah, the Kingdom of the Sea wasn't actually a great place after all. At least Tsunami was able to say goodbye to Anemone first. And then, they promised that they'd do everything they could to end the war. Anemone said thank you, because she was an animus, and Coral was trying to use her magic to end the war. Next, they went to the Rainforest Kingdom, the kingdom where Glory's family would be. Glory didn't really want to go. The other 3 dragonettes that had seen their kingdoms, Ash, Clay, and Tsunami, had seen, like, I don't know, a pretty terrible place. Ash had been captured, Clay had found a mother who didn't really care he existed, and yeah, they'd been chained up in Tsunami's own palace. So yeah, she really didn't want to go to her own kingdom, wondering what would be worse. If it would be something terrible, but in the back of her head, could it be that she'd find her family? Someone who actually wanted her? Someone who cared for her? Of course not. Of course not! Of course the Rainwings don't do families. Of course they just throw all of their eggs into one cave and hope against hope that nothing happens to them. They didn't even notice she was gone. Glory was angry, really angry. But in the midst of all this, Ash had found a friend. Another blind dragonette. A Rainwing named Tamarin, whose best friend was a bubbly, loud dragonette named Kinkajou, who had gone missing. Tamarin said that she and Bromeliad were the only ones who noticed she was gone, and that she'd been gone for 3 weeks. This is bad, Glory said. Dragonettes and dragons altogether just shouldn't go disappearing. Well, maybe you can find them, Ash said. In the meantime, Ash and Tamarin became great friends. Tamarin taught her all about life as a blind dragon in the rainforest. She told her where she usually went when things got too loud, because it's a lot easier to hear things when you can't see anything. She showed her all the best spots to find the sweetest fruit. She showed her the beautiful flower gardens of the royal treehouse, and yeah, the 2 of them became friends. Okay, that's it for part 1. It's the first 3 books, so the next part will be books 4, 5, and then Jade Mountain. So yeah, this was a little bit different because the video wasn't my drawing, it was my finished drawings. A lot of them, because I loved drawing Ash. Ash was so fun to draw. I knew I wanted to draw a dragon named Ash, because a SkyWing named Ash, because it just sounded like such a pretty name. And then I was like, okay, I want to make her different. So at first I thought blind, and then last week Cypress, which I will leave a link for in the description, made a video about what if the SkyWing egg survived, and I was like, hey, what if I did something like that, but with my dragonette that I already have that I don't have a story for? So yeah, I made Ash. I made it so that she landed on one side of her leg, so that her leg is bent. Yeah, and I had so much fun drawing Ash. Next week's video will once again be about Ash. It'll be Ash's story part 2. Look out for that, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.